The title of this video is Stop Judging and Awaken Higher Consciousness. The biblical warning to judge not lest you be judged has been a subject of much discussion and even controversy for thousands of years. And for those on a spiritual path, they feel it is not right to judge, and yet there are those people who perpetuate heinous acts of abuse and violence. It's pretty hard not to hold a judgment on them. In fact, we live in a society where there's a court system and a jury system, and they're judging people every day, and they're handing out penalties. So how are we to reconcile the warning not to judge, lest we be judged? This is what we find going on every day in our society. Well, first of all, being non-judgmental does not mean that you don't censure people for doing abusive things or to take advantage of other people. The society has to have rules and consequences for the smooth running of the society. So judgment in the context of spiritual understanding is something else. It has to do with separating the soul and the evolving person from his or her behaviors, because you know that each person's in various stages of their evolution or development. So by analogy, in our educational system, we have people at differing grade levels from kindergarten, first grade, up through middle school, seventh, eighth grade, through high school and college. Well, similarly, we have people at all levels of evolution. And as we would not expect a first grader to be doing high school work, similarly, it's not surprising that those of lesser developed consciousness do not function at the same level of those who are more enlightened. I think this pretty much makes sense. What we call spiritual evolution is the gradual dissolving away of the subpersonalities or behaviors and beliefs that cause pain and suffering. And when you clear that away, that reveals the essential goodness of the soul that simply lies buried beneath all those defense mechanisms. So this does not mean that we have to tolerate offensive behaviors, and in some cases, maybe even many cases, taking action necessary to contain those people who do display offensive behaviors. So we can judge a person guilty of unacceptable behavior without being judgmental on the soul of the person that underlies all those acts that they've done. Now, basically, I'm talking about what we call the ego and how much the ego person is operating with. So people on the lower end of the scale have a great deal of ego personality, which is basically fear-based and reacts with all kinds of negative emotions: anger and hatred and guilt, resentment, grudges, betrayal, aggression, rage. So the ego is the aspect of a person that perceives itself to be separate from all the rest of existence. It's certainly not connected with the soul. It doesn't understand or even recognize what God is. And therefore, it constructs a whole multitude of defense mechanisms to protect itself, basically from the fears that its separation causes. So this can include terror and other strong fears, really strong, raging anger and hatred, sadness and depression and regret and futility and guilt, and all of that could lead to self-sabotage. To be judgment-free means to have space for everything exactly as it is, with an understanding that everything is in some state of development or evolution of consciousness. So as we evolve, there's an unfolding or an uncovering or a revealing of an underlying truth, which we call the soul. And in many cases, the soul is so buried and the ego is so strong and so present that the intensity of negative actions are understandably intolerable to others in society. So I'm speaking about these really strong reactions and behaviors resulting from things like strong, deep hatred and absolute terror of being attacked and fearing for your life and going into a rage for not getting your way and going through a dark night of the soul and deep depression. So being non-judgmental in a spiritual sense means we can have acceptance for the soul of the person, which I sometimes define as essential goodness, or at least the qualities of it are essential goodness, because it's made out of unconditional love. It's kind, it's generous, it's patient, it's loving, it's beautiful, is always happy, joyful. Being non-judgmental in a spiritual sense means that we can have some acceptance for the soul of the person, which I sometimes characterize as having essential goodness, because the soul is unconditionally loving. It radiates light. It's instantaneously forgiving. It's patient. It's always happy. It's joyous. It feels content. It feels satisfied. But that doesn't mean that you have to accept the person's actions, especially if they violate or overstep the freedom of others. So this means that you don't need to tolerate abuse in any form. You can create very clear boundaries and rules and laws, but you understand that the factors that led a person to do abusive things may well be due to that person's upbringing or experiences that they had, or maybe they have mental disorders, maybe from genetics or from taking drugs or environmental factors, or maybe brain damage. And so they may also have a whole string of lifetimes that made them what they are. And it may take quite a while for these people to come to their senses and to begin on some kind of a spiritual path where they begin changing these kinds of behaviors. And the playing out of karma that these negative acts engage, at some point in their future, they will hopefully eventually make choices that do not infringe on others. And they'll come to realize the love, kindness, generosity, and goodness are much better choices for everyone and are the very core nature of their own soul. Judgment is a mental practice that the ego uses to define itself and to assess the potential threat level of people and situations. Clearing judgments, and including self-judgments, are essential to progressing on a spiritual path. When you're free of judgments, you open an infinite space within you for anything and everything positive, and you feel infinitely expansive and acceptant. Now, what about that statement of Jesus? Judge not, lest you be judged. What happens is, when you judge anyone or yourself or anything, you are holding yourself in judgment because one who judges lives in the reality defined by the judgments. Now, this means that the position you take on an issue can lock you into the energy of that position. And then, since like attracts like, you are creating your life experiences by the choices you make about your beliefs and judgments. It's kind of similar in a way to the statement, those who live by the sword die by the sword. That statement is not a threat. It is an observation. It's really similar to the statement, you reap what you sow. So you do things to other people with a sword, and there's a high likelihood that you're going to reap the consequences of being afflicted by a sword yourself. That's what that means. So your own consciousness is what's creating your reality. The judgments you hold are the ones that form the pillars of creation in your life. So if you don't want to be judged yourself, don't live in the frequency and energy of judging anyone else. Give it up. Now, here's the mechanism of judgment and why people do it. I'm going to give you the answer of why people judge. Everyone, other than enlightened people, have a personality identity called the ego. The ego runs primarily on fear and insecurity. And its basic primal fear is it thinks, it imagines, it projects that sometime in the future it's likely to be destroyed or maybe abandoned and banished into darkness and some kind of void. Because that's essentially what it experiences. By its nature and by definition, it has cut itself off from interacting or being part of anything else. All it knows is what comes through the five senses. So it's basically deeply afraid of its own destruction. It's afraid it will cease to exist. And it's afraid that if you keep seeking spiritual things, that you're going to kill it or destroy it. And so it seeks ways to immortalize itself. Now, it's never sure what might develop into a threat to its existence or its safety. So it does that by assigning a threat value to everything. And we call those judgments. So some of the ways it does this is by labeling people. For example, he's a scoundrel and a cheat. She's a bitch and hard to get along with. I'm so stupid. The labels put a person in a box constructed of opinions, conclusions, judgments based on limited and partial information. When you label somebody, you're kind of saying that they are that all the time. The person that you said was a scoundrel or a cheat, does that mean that everything in their life was a cheat or a lie? Of course not. They may have many people in their life that they love and that they're kind to. But you see, we project these labels onto people with partial information. And the labels come in the form of complaints and criticism and blame. Or it could go the other way. There's a positive side, too, of judgment. Praise, tolerance, acceptance. Oh, that's okay. You just made a mistake. We can allow that, even though they may have just ruined something for you. But my point being, all the judgments come from fixed opinions, which come from conclusions, which are actually beliefs. So behind the beliefs, there are judgments about virtually everything. And practically everybody does this. The ego mind judges automatically nonstop. It has all kinds of opinions about everything, like the choice of clothing that you're wearing today, or what somebody else is wearing today, or maybe the color of your car, or the brand of your car, or even the tone of your voice, or how good or how valuable we think a person is. Judgment is something more than just expressing a preference. So let's take the example of ice cream. You might say, well, I love vanilla ice cream, but I don't like chocolate ice cream. So you could assign a value to vanilla ice cream and thereby association also assign value to the person who's eating vanilla ice cream. So it's like saying vanilla ice cream is good, chocolate ice cream is bad, And not only bad, but maybe it's wrong. And if you want to go even further, you might say it's evil. And you might even say chocolate should not even exist. And if it does, it probably should be gotten rid of and wiped off the face of the earth. That's a judgment. And there's some religions that do that to other religions. So judgment is basically a rating system. People project the ratings onto other people. They project them onto everything that a person does or the situation. It's an attempt of the ego to increase its own feelings of safety and security, and it wants to feel right. One of the basic needs and drives of the ego is it is a strong need to be right. So it's constantly sniffing the wind, so to speak, to see where everybody else is in relation to itself, in order to ensure that it feels safe as possible. And so it loves to feel superior to other people. The non-judgment space is a real key that opens you to the universe and reality behind all appearances. As long as you have any judgment, you cannot experience a state of consciousness like enlightenment, because you can't enter there if you have a judgment. High consciousness is judgment-free. So, for those who want to access higher states of consciousness, it is essential they work to eliminate judgments. And surrender is the main way to let go of judgments. And when you do that, you automatically enter the realm of the soul, where there are no judgments. And this is the reality that lies behind all the creation. And once you reach that, that is what we call enlightenment. When you fully and totally embody the enlightened awareness of the soul, at that point, it's impossible to have a judgment about anything. Why? Because the soul doesn't judge. You know, the soul wouldn't even know how to judge if you told it to. If you told the soul you wanted to have a judgment, to take a position about what someone else is doing, it doesn't know how to do that. It's not part of its nature. It can't do it. So when you integrate the soul into you, you'll find that there's a very expansive feeling of infinite acceptance of anything exactly as it is. And yet, you're also able to take part in censuring people about how people should be handled if they overstep the bounds and violate the freedom of other people. Most people have judgments and opinions about everyone and everything, and yet the soul is the exact opposite. It has no judgments about anyone or anything. Well, for one thing, if you ask the soul to judge someone, it doesn't see the person the way you do through your senses. It sees the soul of the person. So the soul is made out of essential goodness and unconditional love. How do you have a judgment about that? You see, the soul operates in a whole different realm from where people who are driven by ego operate. So therefore, people that are ego-driven don't understand that. They have no way of really comprehending how the soul operates. Almost everyone naturally wants to think the causes of their life situation lie outside of themselves. But the judgments are based on beliefs, and they are what set the laws of creation and attraction in motion. Everything that you have came because there was an underlying belief that created it or attracted it. Now, I know that could be a really painful and distasteful pill to swallow. But the reason it works that way is because most of the things that you end up attracting to yourself are coming from unconscious places, your subconscious mind, but there's also your unconscious. Karma, for instance, is not just in your subconscious mind. There may be components of it there. It's in what I'd call the unconscious. It's actually in what in the East they refer to as the causal body. It's a place where all the causes and forces that attract and create things in your life are stored. And in many cases, if not most cases, you're not even aware of what's in there. So things seem to happen to you from out of the blue. You don't even understand why they came into your life, or why people came into your life, or why they treated you that way. So it takes a bit of digging to find out what these unconscious forces are. Everything you experience has beliefs underlying them. It's just, that's the way the universe operates. It all operates on beliefs, and it couldn't operate any other way. Beliefs are what pour energy into the creation process. Now, I know this is a difficult and foreign concept to most people because they are judgmental about just about everything, including self-judgment and self-criticism. One of the problems with judgments is they hold you at the consciousness level of the judgment. Another way of saying this is that your judgments define your reality. They give quality and definition to your experiences in life. They define the boundaries of your acceptance. They define what you tolerate and you don't tolerate. So they're creating boundaries. You literally utilize your judgments and beliefs to create the box that you live in. Your judgments are based on your basic beliefs. And your beliefs also are what hold your opinions. When you have an opinion of someone, you're also admitting that you have certain beliefs about the person, and those beliefs are defined by your judgments about the person. And so you go through life like a radio transmitter, putting out all these vibrations of your judgments out into the universe, along with the beliefs behind them. And like a mirror, they come reflected back to you. I have a book titled The Soul Solution, and it has a whole chapter in it that's titled The Mirror Universe. It goes into some detail about this. It's the nature of the universe to reflect back to you what you have projected into it. On the other hand, the more free you are of judgments, the higher levels of acceptance and love and patience and tolerance that you have, and therefore the higher levels of consciousness and awareness you have, and the higher the level of consciousness you live in. So when you become free of judgments, and to the degree that you are free of judgments, kind of defines how big that box is that you live in. If you're completely free of judgments, there's no limitation. There is no longer a box containing you. An important aspect of non-judgment is that it opens you to be able to receive. Because as long as you have a judgment, it's like having doors closed, or at least not very fully open, because your judgments define how open you're going to allow the doors to be in order to receive. So people ask me quite frequently why they don't have more of what they want. Well, there's your answer. What judgments do you project on yourself and on others, or on the universe for that matter, or on God? Another way of saying this is What do you believe to be true about yourself and all the people you're in business with or interact with? In order to receive what you want or what you want to manifest and move into higher states of consciousness, you need to release judgments and limiting beliefs at all levels. A place of no judgment is a place of deep surrender. The place of total and complete surrender is a place where there is no judgment. A place of no judgment cannot exist without being surrendered, because that means you're not taking a position. And surrender cannot exist unless there are no judgments. So the two go hand in hand, and the result of both is enlightened consciousness. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. I'm going to use color this time as the metaphor. Now, you can substitute anything you want that you might have a judgment about. I'm going to use color in this example. So you can have a judgment that blue is better than red. So this might cause you to paint your house blue and buy a blue car and perhaps wear a lot of blue clothing. But if you are stuck on the subject of color as being good and other colors being bad, you might define your life through the lens of the color blue. So your judgment about blue limits your life to the blue world. Now, if you surrender your judgments about blue, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy blue, but it opens you to also be able to enjoy red and, in fact, all the other colors as well. So you can substitute just about any position or judgment for the color blue, and you can readily see how your position about colors defines your reality. Now, I had this being appeared to me a long time ago in a meditation. And this being was a very dark energy. And as I'm looking at this being, I said, "Are you a dark being because you are evil?" And the being then opened up the clothing that it was wearing that was dark, and it was blazing every color of the rainbow. This being was like a diamond with a billion facets, just radiating all these colors. And the being said, "I wanted you to realize that there's no judgment that you should have about appearance or color." Well, it made the point pretty strongly for me. So I've been pretty neutral about things like that and pretty non-judgmental for a large part of my life. And I've made the statement, I'm willing to let go of judgments. I made it part of my philosophy of life so that I remain neutral on just about every topic you can name. For one thing, I recognize that I don't have all the information about everything. Therefore, how could I form a firm belief or judgment about it unless I know everything there is to know about it? So I've taken the position of maybe. If someone tells me something, I'll be inclined to say maybe that's true, but it may not be. Do you know everything there is to know about that decision or that person? Well, I doubt that would be the case. So I don't know if blue is better than red. To say that it is would be a value judgment, and I have no basis to make that judgment. Therefore, I don't have an opinion about it. I would say blue is probably just as good as red, or yellow, or green, or anything else for that matter. Judgments are positions which are actually made up of opinions. They're ideas created in your mind, and then you become attached to them, but they are only ideas. They are not necessarily facts. Judgments are not facts. Beliefs are not necessarily facts. Opinions are not facts. These are all ideas. These are all things that you carry in your mind that either someone else put in your mind, they were somebody else's ideas, or ideas that you came up with. So basically, they're mental constructs. They're illusions in your mind. Once you recognize that they are opinions based only on current information, and usually partial information, then you might be a little bit more easily willing to let go of the judgment, or at least be willing to open to other possibilities. So by releasing judgments, you may also change your perceptions because you open yourself to other possibilities. And as a result, you change your experiences because what you experience is determined by your beliefs. A problem with judging is you confine yourself by the judgment. The more you let go of judgments, the more possibilities open up before you. Now, do you realize how profound this is? Every spiritual perspective has an idea or view or perception about what awaits in the afterlife, or what it will be like when you have evolved into a fully enlightened state. Once you have taken a position, you seal your fate to be confined by the parameters of that belief. Now, what would your life be like if you let go of all of your judgments? All of them. That means letting go of rigidly fixating on any belief. So as you release judgments, which includes beliefs, you find that you progressively open to other realities that you may not have even known existed. How could you have an expectation or a judgment about something that you've never seen or experienced? And yet that's what people do in religion all the time. When you have no position or judgment about an experience or a state of consciousness like enlightenment, you open up access. An important question to ask in order to escape the judgment trap is, why do you judge? What's going on? Well, judgment ultimately comes from a fear of not being in control. Without control, the ego personality driven mind believes it will have suffering and difficulties and possibly even be destroyed at some point in its future. So judgments are driven by desires to control, and control is the main mechanism the ego uses to feel secure. The ego believes if it lets go of control, it will go into endless darkness or maybe even be destroyed. All of this comes down to the fact that the ego exists in a state of separation, isolation, and limitation. I sometimes refer to the universe of the ego as a universe of darkness, and it is actually a self-created isolation. That's everything that you and the ego personally don't want. The ego hates this. It's deeply in fear of this experience. And so it uses attachments and judgments as a means of keeping itself from experiencing the void of darkness and separation. Therefore, underlying all judgments and control issues are fears, some kind of fear. The need to judge comes from a place of insecurity. Judgments put everything in a place by defining it, thereby creating the illusion of controlling it through the judgment. Who is judging? Only the ego can judge. The soul is incapable of judging. Now, this is a very important subject yet, because it literally affects everything in your life. When you become aware of judging and what it is, you're going to catch yourself doing it quite a bit more frequently than you might be thinking right now. Becoming aware of judging is 90% of ending doing it. I suggest checking in with yourself numerous times through the day and ask, what have you judged since the last time you checked in? If you find a judgment, refute it, surrender it, let it go. Acknowledge you don't have all the information. Disintegrate it, but find a way to disengage it and dissolve it. And in time, you'll become more clear on the subject of judgments, and more clear you become, you'll find that you stop doing it. So here are some words to say to yourself after me. I am willing to surrender the need to judge anyone. I am willing to surrender the need to judge anyone. I no longer have a need of judging. I fully surrender the need to judge. I am happily free from judging. Now, I want you to focus for a little bit on one particular aspect of judging that gets people in a lot of trouble, and that is self-judgment. This is also known as self-doubt, self-criticism, and self-blame. The self-judging mechanism is a self-monitoring mechanism. It watches and analyzes everything that you do. In fact, many times it is so diligent, it scrutinizes everything you do, looking to catch you. And then it points a finger at you to undermine you, to make you wrong. So the inner judge may have a voice that says something like, you should be ashamed of yourself. I told you so. There's something wrong with you. You screwed up again. You don't deserve anything good. You deserve to be punished. You deserve to lose. So this watcher-judge mechanism, which is part of the ego mind, questions you, doubts you, second guesses you, evaluates you and all of your choices. It thinks it's helping you because it would say that it doesn't want you to be wrong. It doesn't want you to make a mistake. And so then it criticizes you and tells you how imperfect you are or attacks what you have done. I call this the critical judge or the watcher, and it is related to the analytical part of the mind. This is the part of your mind that analyzes everything that you say, think, and do, as well as everything and everyone else and what they say, think, and do. It's a function of the ego personality. It's constantly monitoring you and assigning an opinion and a value to everything. It is primarily a mental program, and it has a lot of self-critical, self-doubting, self-condemning, self-talk. It set up a rating system designed to keep you from doing something wrong or bad. But it always seems to manage to find something that doesn't quite live up to its standards. And this is due to the fact that the ego by nature is incomplete. It knows something is missing, but it doesn't know what. So no matter how perfectly you do something, the ego will still not be satisfied. It will project a belief and a feeling there's something missing. You came up short. You're not enough. There's something wrong with you. The ego thrives on guilt. And guilt is what maintains about 80 to 90% of negative karma. Negative karma holds beliefs that you've done something wrong. And that something wrong requires that you must do something in payment. And the forms of payment are usually in the form of pain, struggling, or loss. In addition, because the ego, by its nature, is incomplete, it's always searching for something it doesn't have. It always comes from a place of lack or shortcoming, and therefore it's always self-critical. So let's address this with some releasing statements. So repeat these thoughts in your mind after me, but be sure to move your lips. I surrender and release all judgments that I need judgments. I surrender and release all judgments that I need judgments. I surrender and release all parts of me that hold the rest of me in judgment or criticism. I surrender and release all parts of me that hold the rest of me in judgment or criticism. I surrender, release, and dissolve all need for judgments. I surrender, release, and dissolve all need for the habit of judging. I surrender, release, and dissolve all need for the desire to judge. I forgive myself for criticizing myself. I surrender and release the need to compare myself to anyone. I surrender and release the need to be right. This is a big one, so I'm going to repeat it. I surrender and release the need to be right. I surrender and release the need to change others. I surrender and release the belief life was meant to be a struggle. I surrender and release all parts of me that continue to want or need to judge. Now, just listen. To deal with the ego and its core issues, of which judgment is one of them, you request the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge into it, assimilate it, heal it, integrate it. I'm speaking into deepening into the soul merging process. The ego is an aspect of awareness, and your energy has been fragmented and gone out on its own. It's like an independent subpersonality or identity that functions with some of your life force energy. The best way to initiate the soul merge process is to compassionately embrace the part of you that's in pain, much as you would an injured child, with tenderness, gentleness, caring. And then, like the story of the prodigal son, you welcome and bring the aspect of consciousness living in suffering and separation back home. And you integrate it into the wholeness with the soul. And all the pain, all the separation, all the negative qualities disappear. Believe me, this works a whole lot better than viewing the ego as the enemy that must be destroyed. That approach just doesn't work very well. But it is what a lot of people seem to be trying to do. I've actually heard people use the term, they have to kill the ego. And I've known some people that have been meditating for decades trying to kill the ego and have not been successful. Well, understandably, the ego doesn't like hearing those words about being killed or talking about ego death. Remember, the ego is a survival mechanism. It wants the personality to survive. It wants its identity to survive. Killing the ego actually means dissolving a false sense of separation so you experience direct connection with the soul and divine presence. There's, in the process of the dissolution of the ego, it's really not the ego that's being dissolved. It's all of the belief structures and all of the reaction structures that the ego holds that give way to a higher way of experiencing existence by merging with the soul. So there's a much more healing approach to the ego problem that encourages the ego to cooperate with the process. And this is done by recognizing that the ego wants something. What does it want? Well, we've said this before. It wants to be safe. It wants to be accepted. It wants to be secure. It really wants to be loved. And that is exactly what the soul merge offers. In Sufism, this process is referred to as annihilation of the self. This is where the ego dissolves its separate identity of pain and suffering, and it's enveloped in love and the presence of God in the soul. At this point, you automatically live with higher soul qualities of love and kindness and happiness, understanding, patience, and generosity. So to help you with this transformation, repeat these thoughts in your mind after me while you move your lips. I invite the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge into the part of me that judges me. I invite the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge into the part of me that judges me. I ask my soul to embrace and merge into the judge in my mind. I ask my soul to embrace and merge into the judge in my mind. The soul merge process is really the key to our evolution. I have a program that I've titled Soul Merge to help with this process if you're interested. Because the soul merge process reclaims all that life force energy that the ego has been using to sustain its pain and its defenses. And it helps reintegrate it all back. It releases the energy of life force that was trapped in the negative responses. Now, a way to do this is also, in addition to soul merging, is to call on the specific qualities of transformation and integration. These are qualities the soul has. The soul can help you transform and integrate its very qualities into you. When you address the soul as the presence of transformation and integration, you invoke these qualities that they activate. So, if you're wanting to clear something or dissolve something, you merge the soul with the qualities of transformation and integration to do so. Now you have to ask. You ask to have your issue embraced with transformation and integration, and then you hold that intention and the space for that process to engage and to happen. This doesn't happen automatically. It's the intention, which is like a prayer, saying, here is what my intention is. Here's what my desire is. Here is what I want to do. What happens is the life force of that fragment then returns and integrates, and the illusions sustained by the energy of whatever that judgment was drop away because they're not real. They're just ideas that were made up, so they appear to dissolve. They actually just vanish. So once the aspect of your energy is no longer separate, it integrates. Then the illusions it held disappear because there's no longer energy to hold them in place or sustain them. Everything the mind creates, including all of its beliefs, can only exist in separation. So that's the theory. Those are the intentions. If you want to reclaim the parts of yourself that have been seeing you as if there's something wrong with you, or that you're less than, or like you've done something wrong or bad, as if you are imperfect, defective, deserving of punishment. And as a result, by judging yourself, you sabotage yourself. Pay attention to these inner voices of questioning and doubt. They're certainly not coming from the soul, so you acknowledge them, especially if you can catch them when they pop up. You embrace them with the soul. You bring light to them. You bring healing to them. You surrender them. Say these words to yourself. I hold all painful memories of my suffering in gentle mercy and compassion. I hold all painful memories and all of my suffering in gentle mercy and compassion. I invite the healing soul to merge into all suffering and difficulties. I invite the healing soul to merge into all suffering and difficulties. I bring deep peace, wholeness, and completion of the soul into all pain and struggling. I bring deep peace, wholeness, and completion of the soul to all pain and suffering. I bring deep peace, wholeness, and completion of the soul to all pain and struggling. I easily relax and surrender to the presence of my soul. And now listen. You are engaging a healing and clearing process with these requests. And the aspects that resist are forms of fear the ego, personality, and mind create in a futile attempt to protect itself. Because fear is such a strong core program, to heal and clear it, you need to address the fear and the form of the resistance that you are aware of. And that takes surrender, all need for it. Surrender is your key to breaking free from all the limitations and struggling and pain and all the fear. I've done an entire video on surrender. You need to see it if you haven't seen it yet, or if you haven't mastered surrendered. It's titled The One True Spiritual Path. It is surrender that is the path. And it's a commonality of all spiritual practices. Now, no matter what comes to mind, do not engage it in a dialogue. If you do that, you're just going to get hooked into this level of attention of that question. And you're going to drop out of the beautiful higher states that you're in. So what do? You acknowledge it. You say, thank you for letting me know. I bless you and surrender the need for you. Thank you for letting me know. I bless you and surrender the need for you. And you simultaneously hold the intention of bringing in the soul, more light, more soul enlightened presence. What you are doing is bringing support, love, and light to what is causing the difficulty. And your words are the activating triggers of your intentions. Repeat this thought after me. I ask for the light of transformation, integration, and healing to merge into all struggling, doubting, and suffering. And now listen. One of the things ego resistance does is it throws up questions. It'll bring up more questions as you bring in more clearing. As your consciousness shifts, whatever is underneath is going to rise to the surface. So when it does that, there's another part of the mind that wants to respond to the questions. If you are pulled into the dialogue, you will go from being hooked by one thing to another. So here's what you do. You surrender the questions. Now, that doesn't mean you're never going to have a question. Of course not. What you want to surrender is the quality around questioning and doubting, because that's what the mind and the ego use to engage you and to perpetuate their very existence. Many of the kinds of questions the mind comes up with do not have concrete answers. So it uses this uncertainty to keep you searching. And surrendering questions is what allows the soul's intelligence and presence to fill the need for the questions. And then peace emerges. So say to yourself, I am willing to surrender and release the need for questions. Now, as you move deeper into a surrendered state, the ego has an agenda of not wanting you to go there. It wants to hold you back in what is more familiar territory to the ego. And the ego, as I've said, is primarily driven by fear, mostly fear of being destroyed. And since, through surrender, you move into the areas that are unfamiliar to it, it perceives the surrender process itself as threatening, because through surrender, you let go of the ego's many defense mechanisms. So the ego thinks if it lets you go further into surrender or into more enlightened states, it doesn't know what will happen to you. And it feels very insecure with this process. So it wants to hold you back. It fears what it has not experienced. It fears the unknown. So it brings up caution. It is afraid of what it has not experienced. And this creates an issue of holding you back, and therefore you feel stuck. The ego will let you explore, surrender some, but the further you go, the more threatened it feels. So the ego is actually pretty happy to let you search and practice your religious ceremonies or spiritual practices, because as long as you're doing something, it feels safe within the universe of those practices it can control. It gives you a sense of having a spiritual experience, but it also limits you. It does not allow the full experience of full merging with the soul or into deep God consciousness or God realization. No, the ego mind will say, you've gone far enough. To address this ego concern, you're going to want to acknowledge the concern the ego has so you can address it also with surrender. You cannot muscle your way through this pattern. The more you try to force your way through it, the more the ego is going to push back and resist. The ego's fear is you will move into dangerous water, or you will lose something that it needs in order for you to control its experience or its reality. Now, one of the paradoxes with surrender is that as you surrender control, you actually gain more control. And that happens because you liberate the soul, and there is no greater safety than that. It's not control in the way the ego does. The ego controls by manipulation. With the soul, you feel more in control because you become more of an empowered presence. Therefore, you have more control. So by embracing the ego and its concerns with a fully enlightened awareness of the soul, you will never feel like you're losing anything or being threatened in any way. Quite the contrary. There is a continuous opening and expanding into a liberating presence. You become aware that you are far more than the little ego ever imagined. Say these words to yourself after me. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge fully into all fears. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge fully into all fears. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge fully into all need for control. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge fully into all need for control. And now just listen. You just relax and surrender more deeply. And you keep melting and dissolving and eliminating all the fear and all sense that you are stuck. The soul knows that what lies beyond the perception of the ego is something so much greater and better than the ego could ever imagine. It is not less than, it is not scary as the ego imagines. In fact, as the soul moves into the fears of the ego, there is a deepening comfort. a deepening security, and a deepening awareness of peacefulness. So let's go further. The soul merge statement of intention engages a process and opens a door to allow you to peer into the underlying vastness of creation. So just allow yourself to drift into the surrender process so you can feel you are deeply surrendering, letting go of all holding, all resistance. And as you do that, you open an invitation to the soul for it to intelligently merge into, to absorb, infiltrate deeply through all aspects of your consciousness that are separate. And it dissolves the barriers that sustain the illusions. The soul is really the only thing in a position to bring you into unity, enlightened consciousness. You cannot have it without the soul's participation. And all you need to do is relax and ask for it. Now, really pay attention to any voices that arise, because voices are one of the main means the ego uses to communicate with you. And the voices define what the ego is made out of. So this gives you clues to where to go next with your clearing process and to bring surrender. So you keep doing this. You keep surrendering and then listening. When you make a surrender statement and hold that surrender intention, then you listen. What is the commentary? What does your mind say? What else might come up as you move progressively throughout all the chambers of your consciousness that the ego has constructed? And as you keep doing this, eventually you become totally filled with the soul and the light and presence of the soul. And we've already been doing that. So the process is underway. And you want all those separate voices within you in agreement, surrendered, unified, merged into a singular will, singular presence, singular mind, all under the orchestration and operation of the highest enlightened awareness of the soul. You have to invite the soul where you want it to be. It does not and will not automatically push its way in there unless you invite it into there. You want to know why? The reason is that it was pushed out by you, maybe unintentionally, but it was pushed out by free will choices. You made decisions. You made choices to react from fear, from anger, from hatred, from guilt, or whatever it was. Those were your choices. You had free will to do that. And therefore, it takes free will to invite the soul back in. You push it out, you have to invite it back in. Until you do this, you have an unconscious intention in place, which is keeping it out, and you're keeping the ego choices in. Repeat these intentions now after me. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge, fill, and integrate all of my aura layers. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge, fill, and integrate into all of my aura layers. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge, fill, and integrate into all of my chakras. I ask the highest enlightened awareness of the soul to merge, fill, and integrate into all of my chakras. And now request that your heart open to receive the fullness of the light and presence of your soul. Asking the soul to merge into your heart center, receiving it without any conditions. Just relax and open, opening your heart very deeply. And let the divine source of love and light just pour that love and light into your heart. And as it fills your heart, let it melt all the places of suffering and struggling. As the soul comes in, it melts and integrates everything unlike itself. And you let them all go. You surrender. You surrender to the clean, clear, healing light of divine presence. You want every corner of your heart to be immaculately clean, pure, and clear, and radiant with the deep divine love of the soul. You want every corner of your heart to be immaculately clean, pure, and radiant, clear with divine soul love. Say to yourself, I'm willing to open myself completely to the deep love and light of God. I am willing to open myself to the deep love and light of God. And just notice and give permission to allow the inflow of divine peace, love, and light to flow into and through your heart, out to your whole body, your energy field, your life stream, sending it all the way back to your beginning and all the way out into your future, into infinity. So your whole life stream or timeline is filled with divine peace, love, light, and the fully enlightened presence of the soul. And just say yes. Accept what is being given to you right now. This is a very important part of the process. This is about you receiving and saying, yes, I acknowledge I am the divine love and light of God. And the last step is a deepening of the acceptance and the deepening of surrender to allow what is coming to you. The true self, the highest enlightened awareness of your soul, as you open to allow it to come in and merge very deeply through all levels of your consciousness, through your entire history, to your entire future, and to become the totality of what you express, what you experience, who you are. Sense the deep, expansive presence and love, and feel deep appreciation. Enjoy the presence of these energies and these realizations. Have pleasant dreams and beautiful experiences until we connect again. I am Jonathan Parker.